Thank you, D.A. Thank you so much. Well, it is so good to be here in Oklahoma on Election Day. This is kind of exciting. I am thrilled to be here. Some of you know me a little bit. I do a lot of coaching and work in this conference and around. But I just want to thank you for your open spirit today since I've been here. I've just been milling around, and I've heard so many wonderful stories of your churches and your life together and your covenant together and your ministry together. You have just made me feel like at home, a part of the family story. And as a part of that, I want to just take a moment and, would you mind, I appreciate D.A. inviting me, but I tell you, I have worked with your bishop, Bishop Nunn, for many years. This is a person who has been in the trenches of turning United Methodism around and creating revival and renewal. Would you just thank him with me for Bishop Nunn's leadership? And I do love hearing the stories and I'm a guy that loves family stories, and so it feels good, even though I'm across the Red River, to be a part of your family, at least a little bit. I grew up with this family story. My father was multiply handicapped from birth. But when he turned about 15 or 16, like every teenager, his heart started beating fast when he met the lovely Sylvia Mae Carr, who later became my mother. And so my family's told this story for years. They lived in rural Illinois in a little place called Greenup, Illinois. Now let me set the stage. It's a farmhouse, and there's a long lane, and on either side of the lane were cornfields or bean fields. And at the end of the lane was the pond, and next to the pond was the mulberry tree. And every year, for generations, when somebody, they began to fall in love with a sweetheart, they'd walk down to the lane. And some of you remember these kind of days. They'd take their pocket knife, the guy would carve a heart in the tree trunk and the initials of his sweetheart. So Sylvia Mae they were there visiting, and they're drinking lemonade on a Sunday afternoon. And my dad, Leo, said, well, we're going to go to the mulberry tree, which meant this is serious. Now, the problem is because my dad was multiply handicapped, he could only get around with either crutches or a cane or something like that, so he had to walk very slow. And when he made that announcement, he made a little bit of a strategic error because his younger brother, my Uncle Gene, heard him. And so when Sylvia and Dad started down the lane, Uncle Gene ran around those cornfields to the pond and climbed up into that tree. And so by the time they got there, it was dusk, and they sat down at the trunk of the tree, finishing their lemonade. The moon was starting to come up over the cornfields, and my dad, he pulled Sylvia close to him and saw that moon cresting the cornfields, and he looked up and he said romantically, "Shiny moon high above, should I kiss the one I love?" Because that's the way Midwesterners in love talk. He said, "Shiny moon high above, should I kiss the one I love?" And they were shocked when they heard a voice, "Lover boy down below, pucker up and let her go." Now, I've never known if that's a true story, but I know this is true. I know you love the Lord, and I know you who are here love your churches and your people. And I know you are here, love this annual conference. But dear friends, it's time to pucker up and let her go. To plant the passionate kiss of the grace of Jesus Christ right on the cheek of your mission field. Can I get an amen? Amen. Friends, we cannot wait. Now, I pastored a church, as D.A. mentioned, in Flower Mound, fast-growing community. Church grew pretty fast. Matter of fact, in our main worshiping congregation, we average 1,500 a week in worship. Now, for a Methodist church, that's a pretty good-sized church, don't you think? But just think about this. Every week, the United Methodist Church loses from its rolls a worshiping congregation the size of the one I preached. 1,500 people a week. Now, there was a day when those 1,500 went off our rolls because just down the corner there was some church that preached the Bible, and they wanted to go there. But that's not the case anymore. Or just around the block, there was a church that had really great lively music. But that's not the case anymore. Almost all of those 1,500 come off of our rolls only because they go on to God's greater glory in heaven. Now, friends, don't think this is just a Methodist problem. Consider this. Not one county, not one in the United States of America reports more Christians today than it did 10 years ago. Can we just get honest with each other a little bit here this afternoon and acknowledge that our churches are filled with wonderful, good-hearted, spirited people, but we have just gotten a little lethargic, a little casual about reaching out and finding new people for the gospel of Jesus Christ. Can I get an amen? Is that the way it is here? It certainly is for most of the churches that I work with and the conferences that I work around. So I'm going to spend a little time this afternoon just share with you 2 or 3 principles that are highlighted in our book, Clip In, Risking Hospitality in Your Church. I want to have you take away things that you can start doing this Sunday to help accelerate the growth of your church, because we just can't wait to make the impact God needs us to make. But before I start talking, I want to take just a few minutes and let you talk. Now, table leaders, you've got a little packet. If you would be sure, everybody at your table has a little packet that's called the High Impact Church, Becoming a High Impact Church. It's a series of faces. Just get that. Now, I'm going to give you instructions. So hold on, don't do anything until I give you the instructions. You with me? Everybody got one? We're going to do this in 2 phases. First of all, I want to ask each of you individually to do this. No cheating or peeking. And then I'm going to ask you to share just a few minutes around your table some of your responses. Now, there are lots of ways to talk about the impact of your church. This is just one, but we find it a very good one. This is an emotogram. It's really helpful. We use this in a lot of churches today because it uses more than just words, but some graphic images. And believe me, the generation that we must reach. Now, folks, look. I'm 67 years old. Most of the people my age have already made their church-going decisions. We have to reach a new generation and to speak their language. Now, so you'll see a series of faces and then 6 categories. So when I say lives changed, if you feel good about that in your church, if you say, you know what, we are experiencing regularly lives being changed, you'd circle that smiley face. If when I say lives change, you think, yeah, I don't know, maybe there are, maybe they're not, I don't know. If when I say lives change, and you think honestly about your church today, no reason here to try to impress each other, we're just being honest with each other. If you say, you know, our church does a lot of cool programs, a lot of cool ministries, but I'm not sure we're really changing lives, you'd circle that frowny face. If you don't know what the heck I'm talking about, you'd circle that question mark face. Are lives being changed in your church? Is the community being improved because of your church and its existence? With community leaders, neighbors, and residents saying, that church is making a difference in our community? Is the world being transformed, either through mission trips or offerings? Are you helping transform the world well beyond the walls of your church and your community? Is the church able to be mobilized? Do you have communications and passion so that if somebody has a tragedy like a house fire, that your church can rally immediately, get food and shelter and clothing? Or what if it's somebody's house burns down that's not a member of your church? Is the church mobilized? Are the laity energized? That is, this hallway conversation and talk filled with a buzz about the future and excitement, and people stepping up to take care of the ministries and respond to the needs of your community. And lastly, are you reaching new people? If you feel good about that, you'd circle the smiley face. You got the idea? 30 seconds. If you did this next week, it may be different than today. Just a snapshot in your heart today. Quickly, right now, just 30 seconds. Go with your gut. You don't need to think about this. What's the impact? Notice this is a way to talk about the impact of your church. This is not a scientific way to rate it or to measure it or to assess it. This is just getting conversation started in your congregation. Everybody finished? All right, and I want to ask you to take 2 or 3 minutes, just go around the table and share with each other why you circled any one face, why you circled what you circled. A few more minutes, please. Get started. Thanks. Okay, thank you. This is, thank you. Now, I'm going to do my best to get you out of here early this afternoon. We could talk about this for a long time. This is a great exercise to use in your churches, just to get your congregation talking about each other, with each other. Let me say that, because they're always talking about each other. The impact of your church is what you are responsible for as pastors and clergy. But your laity are the ones who make it happen. So the impact of your church, I hope, is as the bishop said this morning's remarks, is deep in your heart. Not just how are we doing, but what impact are we making to change things? Now, I've been a pastor. Just this year, I'm celebrating my 51st year in ministry. So thank you. Yeah, this month, actually. For 44 years, I was a pastor like most of you here. For the last 8 years, I've been helping create a culture of churches starting churches in the North Texas Conference. Where I pastored at Treach, we started 3 congregations from that church. And so the bishop asked me, actually, the bishop told me, he wanted me to leverage my experience and help create this culture of other churches starting churches in the North Texas Conference. And so I started doing that, and kind of one thing led to another, and I began to work with churches and helping with that. And so for the last 8 years, I've been doing a lot of church coaching. I coach a number of churches here in this conference, outstanding clergy, and a lot of consulting to just kind of draw my experiences. So for 44 years, I was a pastor. The last 8, I've been a church coach and a consultant. Now, you know what a church consultant is. Like this shepherd, seasonal shepherd up in Montana in the hills. For 3 or 4 months at a time, it's just him and his dog and the sheep. He never saw another person. He was shocked one day when he sees this trail of dust coming up on a mountain logging road. And to his surprise, it wasn't somebody driving an old green pickup truck, but this guy pulls up in a brand new silver, shiny Porsche. And he gets out and he's dressed to the nines, Armani suit, Ray-Ban sunglasses. He walked over to the shepherd. He said, if I can tell you exactly how many sheep you have, can I have one? And the shepherd said, I guess. He whips out his smartphone, connects to some kind of a satellite. In seconds, he said, you have exactly 1,532 sheep. And the shepherd said, well, that's right. So the guy makes his selection. He's putting it into the Porsche, and the shepherd said, wait a minute. If I can tell you exactly what your occupation is, can I have him back? And the guy said, I guess. And the shepherd said, you are a consultant. And the guy said, well, that's exactly right. How'd you know? And the shepherd said, well, first of all, you showed up here when nobody asked you to. Yeah, you've worked with consultants. Secondly, you gave me an answer to a question that I already knew the answer to. And third, you don't know anything about my business. You just took my dog. I want to assure you, my Oklahoma friends, I know your business. I grew up in the Methodist church, was in the youth group. My mother and my dad, they held every job there was to hold, more than once, at the Douglas Avenue Methodist Church in Springfield, Illinois. I started ministry when I was a junior in high school. I know your business. I know how hard it is today to be a mainline United Methodist church when most of us are struggling to keep our head above water, and all around the corner is some mega church that's going and blowing. I know how hard it is to keep morale high and spirits soaring. I know how hard it is to try to raise a budget when people are not as generous as they once were. I know how hard it is to try to find, recruit, and train good staff. And how hard it is to have to let staff go that's not such a good match. I know your business, but I do not know your churches. So I just want to say, forgive me in advance if in this next hour and a half I say anything that makes it sound like I know more about your church than you do. I don't. Here's my hope. That my experiences working with churches just like yours in 30 annual conferences and your experience in your church, that today somehow we might come together and find ways to go forward to reach our community mission field together. I am honored to be speaking on this day when clergy are together and you are doing John Wesley's covenant prayer and covenanting together. And I'm going to end this morning, or this afternoon. I have an old handcrafted yoke up here, and I want to invite you. I'm going to talk about that yoke later, about how it means when clergy work together with a great bishop, with a passionate cabinet, how we can learn from each other and how we can move together and how we can make an impact throughout this area. So during a break a little later on, before you leave, I want to ask you to come up and just touch this yoke. Leave your fingerprints on it. Feel its hardness and its roughness, because we know how hard and rough the burden of ministry can be. But I think you'll see some ways in which Jesus, who places that yoke upon us, lifts it from us when we're together. So just whenever you have a chance, just come up and feel it, get your camera out, take a picture of it. It's a great metaphor for this day, this covenant day. So take a look if I can get the technology to work here.
Whoa.
Father, why can't we have direct TV like the McGregors do?
We're settlers, son. We settle for things, like having cable instead of direct TV.
Hey, Jebediah, how's it going?
Working the land, hoping for a fertile spring.
All right.
So, we have to live with lower customer satisfaction?
I'm afraid so. Now, go churn us some butter, boy, and then make your own clothes.
Yes, sir.
Don't be a settler. Get rid of cable and upgrade to DirecTV. Call 1-800-DirecTV.
Come on, now that's funny. I'm not going to be asking you to upgrade to DirecTV, but I am going to ask you to elevate your game. To elevate and to not be a settler. Our churches do not have to settle for doing the church the way they did 20, 30, 40 years ago. That we really can upgrade and elevate. We just have to do it together, and we have to do it passionately. And I hope today I'll show you some proven techniques that you can just use. Now, I'm just going to be able to talk about 2 or 3 today from our whole one-day workshop that we do. But you can see a lot of this in our book and any other way that we can possibly resource you and help you. We want to do it. Now, table leaders, in your packet, would you pull out the second item, and would you pass it around your table, face down, please, until I ask you to turn it over. Can you do this real quickly? Face down until I ask you to turn it over. Everybody got one? You see on the sheet there, the second one? This one right here. Yeah. Just take a look at it. This one right here. All right. Is the sound good out here? Can you hear me out here okay? Okay, great. The half sheet? Yeah, just a half sheet. Got it? Take a look. Everybody got one? All right, shout out. Turn it over, look at it. Shout out what you see when you see it. So what do you see? All right. Okay, thank you. So what did you hear is being shouted out? What did you hear being shouted out? You heard different things, right? This is just a little exercise to teach us what? That what you see depends on what? Your perspective. Now, friends, the rest of my time together, I'm going to ask you on this covenant day to covenant with me. I want to reflect on everything in your church, but reflect on it from the perspective of the first-time guest instead of the regular member. Because our churches will not grow without first-time guests who become second-time guests, who form some connection and some relationship. And this has just got to be our focus right now, is seeing how a first-time guest looks at our churches and how they feel when they come in to our churches. So I just want to ask you to, just today, for the rest of the day, just consider not what makes you comfortable as the pastor or your best lay people, but about that first-time guest. Now, friends, relax. DSs, relax. I'm not asking pastors to forget about their existing members. You've got to show some ways to love them. I hope I can show you some today. Otherwise, you know that phrase, you'll have an open front door, but you'll open wider the back door. People will leave, right? So pastors, know this. It's a balancing act. It's a balancing act. If you pastors, if you love your people more than you stretch your people, you will soon be known as their chaplain. Now, chaplains are really valuable, but it's hard to grow churches with chaplains. However, if you stretch your people more than you love your people, you will soon be known as their former pastor. It's a delicate balance. And so I want to share with you today some ways and settings in your church when you really show love to your existing members. That gives you the credibility to really focus on reaching new people. But if your folks feel like you don't care about us, you just care about them, you're in for a long haul. A long haul. You know this, the mission field is ripe unto harvest. Could anybody here deny that in your setting? Aren't there lots of people that don't know Jesus? Aren't there lots of people that aren't connected to a church home? Aren't there lots of people that don't have a faith-family relationship? The fields are ripe. Now, some years ago, the United Methodist Church, thank God, made kind of a shift. We began talking about our communities as a mission field. We borrowed blatantly from missionaries who, when they went to a far-off land, had to learn a new culture so they could proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ in language and practices and behaviors which people could connect to and relate to. And now we know that our own country has become, in some ways, post-Christian. And so as pastors, we have to have that same missionary mindset. We've got to learn the culture of our community, our mission field. Now, really, there are three mission fields. We speak of mission field, but there are really three. The first is this. This is the internal mission field. This is the mission field of your heart and your parishioner's heart. It's very hard for us to go out there and reach the mission field unless our heart has really been touched itself. Jesus said it like this. Remember, Jesus wept. Pastors, let me ask you right now, what breaks your heart? When you get in touch with that, what causes you to weep when you look at your community? What need is out there? What hurt is evident? What problems are present? And when you get into that private place the bishop was talking about this morning, and your own prayer life, what causes you to weep? Your lay people, this is the question to ask them. You will know what ministries are going to reach your mission field when you start with your own internal heart. That's your first mission field. What breaks your heart? What makes all the difference to you if it isn't happening? This helps guide and motivate you. The second mission field is the church itself. Now, some of you have seen this study. Win Arn longtime church sociologist, did a major non-denominational, across all denominations study, and learned that 80% of congregants think the main purpose of the church is what? To take care of who? Friends, if our church's mentality, if the culture is the purpose of my church is to take care of me and my family, that's important. But if that's the purpose, it will be very hard to penetrate a mission field. You see, the church is the best place to start reaching the mission field, the church itself. And the best place to reach your mission field is often what happens inside the walls of your church. Before you start trying to go out there, let's be sure that the dynamic on Sunday morning or Saturday evening or whenever you're doing worship is really compelling and connecting. So I want to start by teaching you a little bit about hospitality. Now in your packet table leaders, there's a little card, the 510 link card. Could you pull that out and hand that to everybody? The 510 link card is based on this premise. Now, look, I'm going to be sharing this rest of the afternoon about how to make the shift for a church to go from a wishing trip. You know, that's what most of our churches are. Well, we wish we had more children. We wish we had more young adults. We wish we had more youth. We wish we had more money. We spend our time on a fishing trip, but Jesus asked us to go on a what? A fishing trip. And the best place to go fishing is in the pond you know best, right inside your own church. You see, you have more first-time guests than you probably realize. The question is, will they be a second-time guest? About 600,000 people every year attend some church for the first time. The question is, will they attend a second time? Will they begin to form connections and relationships? Now, people of my generation, we were all schooled. If you do church in a good, sharp, snappy way, when people move into your community and they're a Methodist, they'll come to your church. Or if they're looking for a church, they'll come to your church. The church shoppers would stop their shopping once they experienced your church. Now, there is still some truth to that, today to that. But more and more, all the statistics and the studies show that most churches do not grow anymore from church shoppers. That people really today, they attend a church for the very first time, or for the first time in a long time, within about 30 to 60 days of some life-changing event. Now, what would be a life-changing event? Shout it out. You got the idea. Cancer, disease, a birth. So just as a side, just as a parenthesis, friends, if your church is not providing training and workshops and resource experiences for people going through life crisis changes, you'll have a hard time keeping first-time guests. I mean, that's what's happening all around as people are getting their life needs met in churches. But my point for this morning is just to realize that when people come to the church, we never know what they are bringing. Most people are no longer attending your church for the very first time in a long time neutrally. They're coming for a reason. And that reason is, even though we are a post-Christian country, almost everybody has some memory of church that is actually good. Now, they have some bad ones, but they have some good ones. And so when they get that diagnosis of cancer, when they're going through a divorce, they frequently, they think back about church when it meant something to them when they were a child or growing up. And so they still come back to us. It's not too late. We are not a nation that's forgotten the church. We've just wandered away from the church. So it isn't too late at all for us. Here's the sobering reality. If I'm a first-time guest and I haven't been to church in a long time, and I'm coming driven by some kind of a human herd or some kind of a need, that person in your community is willing to give about 6 weeks of their life to find a church home. Now, friends, it won't be 6 consecutive weeks anymore. We know that about church attendance, don't we? I mean, a loyal church member only comes about 1.4 times a month. But they're willing to give about 6 weeks of their life. Now, they may come to this church, St. Luke, 6 consecutive weeks. Or they may come here one week, to another Methodist church the next time they attend, to a non-denominational church the next time. But they're going to give about 6 weeks of their life in this search. Here's the thing. If at the end of those 6 weeks, they haven't made some kind of a connection, they are likely to remain unchurched for the rest of their life. Friends, the stakes are sky high. We can no longer afford to be random or casual. We've got to go fishing, and we've got to be fishing every week. We have to be prepared and ready to do the kind of fishing that Jesus needs us to do. So take out that 5-10 link rule. We designed this. Now, pastors, I'm going to show you here this right now just how we teach this on a Sunday morning. And let me say, this is best done when taught on Sunday morning. Pastors, if you're convinced, I hope you are by now, that hospitality is so critical, the number one reason of all denominations for at least 10 years of studies that people do not return to a church after their first visit is what? Poor hospitality. This is the easiest thing to fix, and it carries the most leverage and weight. So this is one you got to just nail. Now, there are lots of systems of hospitality. This one is just one that we have found is easy to teach and really does work. So we designed this card. We just tell people in your churches, tell your lay folk, put it in your purse, put it in your Bible, put it in your pocket, put it in your wallet. If you're in a Sunday school class, practice this in Sunday school. If you're in a small group, try to get this to be the curriculum for a few sessions. The 5-10 link rule has two sides. One is the 5-10 link. You see that? And the other side is the weave. Now, the weave is what we use when we train hospitality teams. But that's not going to be my topic today. The 5-10 link rule is what we use to create a culture of hospitality. Now, if you're taking notes, you can write this down. A culture of hospitality means every member, every Sunday. You see, culture is what needs to change in our churches to create growth. And the culture is personal responsibility for every member. So we teach this on the Sunday morning. So pastor, you preach one of your great sermons on hospitality, and the last 10 minutes, you just use this to teach this on the platform on Sunday morning during worship. Now, the best time is usually late August, depending on when school starts, because school for most places starts early September. And also, a great time to teach this is in January, because lots of people are coming to church as a New Year's resolution in January. So you just want to be ready. The 5 of the 5-10 link rule has to do with time. Now, people come to church because they have good friends, and they should. They should buddy up, they should gather up, they should huddle up and catch up. But if that's all they do, your church, which you think is so friendly, will not appear friendly to a first-time guest. So we just ask this. Now look at me. I want to ask you to start making a covenant today that you'll teach this in your church. 5 minutes before the worship service begins, and for the first 5 minutes after it ends, your church members will break up their huddles, and they will go out and they'll find somebody that they do not know. And they'll just extend a hand of friendship. Hi, I'm Jim.
Brian.
Now, when I said I'm Jim, and Brian gave me his name in American social cue, that means, okay, I'll play ball. I'll have a conversation. Now, if I say, hi, I'm Jim, and he just smiles at me and says, good morning, in American social cue, that means, back off, buddy. I need my personal space. And we must honor that. If we do, the only thing worse than poor hospitality is too much hospitality. Because then the guests, they just feel like, I can tell you, they tell us this, fresh meat. You know, they're looking for a pledge card and for a committee volunteer. So this takes some sensitivity, some nuance. But you want to be practicing hospitality. Romans 12:13 says it like this, practice hospitality. So this is a great time. You practice in the pond you know best. The 5 has to do with time. The 10 has to do with distance. So if you're all buddied up here and you're having a great time and you're getting caught up about how how the Cowboys, oh my gosh, I can't go there. You're all buddied up and somebody walks within 10 feet of you alone, somebody will break their huddle and come out and extend that hand of friendship. Hi, I'm Jim. And Terry gave me her name back. One of the myths of mainline Protestantism is that we think people are looking for a friendly church, and we are a friendly church. Believe me, I work with hundreds of churches, and I've yet to work with the second friendliest church in town. They're all the friendliest church in town. But the guest doesn't feel like that. But here's the good news. Today, in this fast-paced world, people really aren't looking for a friendly church as much as they are looking for a church where they might make a friend. And your hospitality, your handshake makes all the difference in the world. Because the reality is, even in a great church like this one, the pastors and the staff and the key lay leaders, you just never know when the person who walks through the doors of your church on Sunday morning for the very first time didn't on Wednesday evening come home from work and find that note on the table, I don't love you anymore, I'm out of here. You just do not know if the person who walks through those doors for the very first time on Sunday morning didn't Thursday morning come home from the doctor with that dreaded diagnosis, cancer. Friends, you just do not know if the person who walks through the doors of your church this Sunday for the first time didn't spend all Saturday night trying to get their kid out of jail. We just cannot assume that people are casually shopping. They are living in some kind of darkness and some kind of pain. And you, dear friend, this is what you teach your lay people. You, dear friend, you may be the bridge over which that person walks for the very first time to be introduced to the light and the love of Jesus Christ. Can I get an amen? You see, church members can't assume that hospitality is the job of the hospitality team. I had this happen once. I was teaching this workshop, and this elderly gentleman, he had been the head usher for 47 years, and he was proud of it. And he wasn't happy about me trying to teach every member every Sunday a culture of hospitality. He actually leaned up against the doorway, crossed his arms, and said to the group, "It was my turn to be friendly last week." This is the kind of mentality that some churches have. You see, it's not somebody's job. It's the culture of your church. And when every member, every Sunday, begins to buy into this, and they won't do it the first year, they won't do it the second year, but if you will drive this home, if you will preach this every year, if you will teach this, equip people, resource people, because the reason God created lay people is to be a bridge over which another lay person may walk for the very first time. Without theological jargon or professional clergy motivation, it's when our lay people, being who they are, extend hospitality, and a person meets Jesus for the very first time. And I can promise you this, years from now, when you're up in heaven, Jesus is going to look over at you and smile and say, because of you, I have a new precious believer. The 10 is space. Get out of your huddle and meet someone new. The link is just that. It's when we physically link people together of a kind of a common affinity. So when I meet somebody and I say, "Hi, I'm Jim," and Elaine gives me her name, what's that mean? We'll play ball. So Elaine and I have a very short conversation. Now look, I'm not selling snake oil here. In the 30 seconds it takes for Elaine and I to have a quick conversation, exchange pleasantries, say hello, shake hands, we can't possibly form a friendship, can we? But dear friends, it is impossible to form a friendship without the first 30 seconds. What if your church becomes known as the church of the first 30 seconds, where people are on target, fired up, intentional about creating relationships? So I say, hi, I'm Jim. And Elaine and I get talking, and I find out that Elaine is a flight attendant for Southwest Airlines. And so I want to say, Elaine, look, come here. I want you to meet somebody right over here. I want you to meet this gentleman. He's a pilot for Southwest Airlines. See, I'm making a common affinity. Or, hey, I want you to meet this guy right where he lives. Southwest flies over his backyard. So, hey, give her a hand. Thank you. You can almost always make some kind of an affinity. The idea is to be connecting people. Because as important as it is to make an introduction, like, hi, I'm Jim, that's really important. But even more important is to make a connection. So I want to immediately connect David to somebody else, even if I don't know them. And I'm going to show you how to do that in just a moment. Because after all, we want to be culturally consistent with who we are as the United Methodist Church. And we are a what kind of church? Connectional. All of us, we intuitively know a part of our job as just being church servants is to connect people to God. Connect them in Christian community. So let's practice our own culture of connecting people. That's the 5-10 link rule. Now, I learned long ago that people don't want to be unfriendly. What keeps our folks from breaking out of their huddles of good friends to reach new people is this whole thing of names, right? We can't remember names. Can I get an amen? Amen. So I just want you to know, I'm just here, to say there is no sin in not remembering a name. In this fast-paced, hurried world, most of us have our brain fried most of the time. We just get too much data, right? And we know this about each other, that we have a hard time remembering names. There is no sin in not remembering names. So I'm here to say, on behalf of Jesus Christ and Bishop Nunn, there is no sin in not remembering a name. The sin is this: when we allow not remembering a name to prevent us from making a connection. And so what happens are people, they just feel awkward and a little bit embarrassed, and so they don't make those connections. So we just teach this right on Sunday morning. And so if you don't mind, and what we do is I just get 3 volunteers. Would you mind, Andrew? Would you mind? Would you mind helping me out? Just come right on up here. And would you mind? So now I don't know if you all know each other. That's not important for what I do. But here's what's important is we're going to role play this and pretend. So you got to go with me here, okay? So we're going to practice, first of all, the 5, which is about what? Time. So y'all are buddying it up. You're talking. You're yin-yanging. You're having a great time. And you notice that it's 5 minutes till the worship service starts. You look at your watch. You think to yourself, 5-10 link rule. So look, so you're going to break out, and you're going to go.
You won't let me go. I have one more story.
Yes, I have one more story. So he's a Methodist preacher, I can tell you. So you want to go introduce yourself.
Andre.
So look, she introduced herself. He gave her name, which means what? We'll play ball. So you've been to this workshop now. You know more important than making just an introduction is to make a connection. So you want to bring Andre over to see your new friend. But here's what happens. In the 10 seconds it takes, she's forgotten his name. Come on, now, doesn't this happen to you? You hear a name, zip, right through your head, out the other side. Come on, be honest. Didn't this happen to you? So what happens is she's forgotten his name. She knows that. She gets a little panicky, and she just say, she don't want to be awkward or embarrassed. So she fails to make the connection. And they kind of have a semi-fake conversation. So here's what you do. So you just bring him right over. And let's say you're pretending, you forgot his name. Do you remember this gentleman's name?
No.
Okay, help me with the name.
My name?
Yes.
Jeff.
So, okay, so you know him, okay? So you just bring him over. You want to look right at him,
Yeah.
motion, and say, have you met Jeff?
Have you met Jeff?
No, I have not. Hi, Jeff. Andre. It's good to meet you. So you pastor too? Yes, I'm a pastor.
So, all right, stay with me. Yes, Oklahomans are a tough crowd. 9 times out of 10, they'll do just what they did. They'll introduce each other. So when you only know one person's name, when you've forgotten that other person's name, don't let that stop you. All right? So you guys be buddying up. We're going to practice the 10 now. Let's go over here if you would, ma'am. Y'all are chit-chatting. And so they see her walking alone, 10 feet away from them. Lonely, haggard, the weight of the world on her shoulders. So, Andre, you're going to break out. You're going to introduce yourself.
Hi, Andre.
I'm Kathy.
So they know they're going to play ball. They're going to have a conversation. You want to introduce him to your friend. But here's what happens. Tell me this doesn't happen to you. In the 10 seconds, he's forgotten both their names. Come on, doesn't this happen to you? All the time. I see hallways in churches wherever I go all the time with people not making connections. So when you can't remember either person's name, you just bring them close, Andre, and just say, have you two met?
Have you two met?
That's all you have. That's all you have to. Give me a hand. Thank you. So, look, you just never know if the person that you're connecting one person to another person, if God's chemistry will work and that person will be a bridge over which a new friend walks. This is a spiritual endeavor. This is an opportunity for your lay folk, but they will only do this if you teach them and equip them. So pastors, now if you can read this in our book, if you need help training folks on this, you can Google this, my name, and Google this. Lots of churches have put this up on their, on their YouTube channels and that kind of thing. So you can find plenty of resources. The issue here and with everything else I'm going to speak about is intentionality. We just can't be random. We can't continue going on a wishing trip. We've got to go on a fishing trip, which means intentionality, being ready to go, making a difference. All right, now, I know you've just had lunch, so I'm going to be risky here. Bishop, I'm going to need your help because you got the 6-shooter here. So let's take 5 minutes to stretch your legs. And we get right back because we're going to be running short on time, and I got a lot more I want to show you. Has this been helpful so far? So get back to it. So 5 minutes. Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, thank you. So 9 times out of 10, people will introduce themselves when you bring them together. But occasionally they won't. So when they don't worry about it. So here's what, again, we're teaching laity. This is what we're teaching on Sunday morning. So when you can't remember somebody's name, you never have to walk up to somebody and say, "Are you new here?" Because they may attend a different service, or they may just attend different weeks, and you don't have to ask that question. You don't have to possibly be offensive. You never have to just walk up to somebody and say, "Gee, you sure are forgettable." Or something like, "I can't remember your name." You don't have to ever ask that. You don't have to say it. You have Methodism's magic word. And it's really magic. All you have to do when you can't remember somebody's name, this works no matter where you are. Because you see somebody that you know in your Sunday school class, but you see them at the grocery store, and it's a different setting, and you can't remember their name sometimes. That just happens. So when you can't remember a name, and the person doesn't introduce themselves, you just have to say, just say this, just say, "Help me with the name." Jeremy. And Jeremy will tell you. You see, everyone loves to help. And that's the culture of United Methodism. We are a helping denomination. That's what you spend so much of your time doing. is helping people. So in the hallways, when I hear lots of, help me with your name, help me with your name, that's not a negative that people aren't paying attention or don't know names. That's a positive, because you're extending the culture of your church, that we are helping and glad to do it. Now, so you can't remember a name, don't let that stop you from making a connection. Now I've done this enough to know that one of you at least out there is wishing you could say to me, it's really important to remember names. And it really is. So please don't hear me discounting not remembering names. I just don't know how to teach you how to remember names. Perhaps you know the story of the first President Bush tells about this episode in his life. He was running for re-election. President Bush was from Houston, and his mother at the time was in a senior care facility. And President Bush was on a campaign trip to Houston. And he said to his entourage, we have got about 15 minutes. I want to go by and see my mother. And they said, well, you can't do that. You're the President of the United States. And he said, well, I can do it. She's my mother, and I am President of the United States. So the whole motorcade pulls into the parking lot of this retirement center, elder care center. And then the whole entourage gets out, and they go in. And now this was one of those places where the levels of care were sequential. And the first building was the level that needed the most care. And President Bush walked into the whole parade. You just see this picture, there's everybody walking in. And you've been to these places. There were a number of very elderly folks in wheelchairs up against the hallway walls, heads down. You've been there, you've been there. One of these ladies just looked up and made eye contact. And as soon as she did, President Bush, forever the campaigner and politician, zeroed in on her. Everybody, he walked right in, he stuck out his hand, he said, good morning. He said, do you know who I am? And she said, well, no, but if you ask at the front desk, they could tell you. Names are important. I don't want to discount them. But don't let not remembering a name stop you from making a connection. The best place to go fishing is in your pond on Sunday morning with the hospitality that's there so that a first-time guest really feels it. The third mission field is, in fact, the external mission field. That's your community. So you have to learn who's there, but not just who's there, but who can you reach realistically? That's what helps churches move from a wishing trip to a fishing trip. The New Testament is really built on this simple principle. Now, I'm not a theologian, but I truly understand the importance of Jesus' teaching in this regard. You know the story. It's found in Luke 5, verses 1 through 11. And so let me just tell you the story real quickly. Jesus is walking the countryside. He's an itinerant preacher. And let's hear it for itinerancy. I just thought I'd help you out there, Bishop. And he's already a very popular speaker, and great crowds were following him. And he walked by the lake, and he sees some fishing boats. Now get this picture. They're about half in the water and half on land. And the fishing boats weren't very large. And then on the beach, there were the nets. They were all spread out, drying, and that's where the fishermen would take the nets and repair the nets. And Jesus sees the boats out there, and he asked the fishermen, he said, look, would you be so kind as to let me get in your boat and push out a little bit so I can finish my sermon? Because it's just the opposite of today. Today, the speaker, me, stands up, and the listeners, you, sit down. But in biblical days, it was just the opposite. The speaker sat down, and the listeners stood up. So to be better seen, Jesus wanted to go out from the shore. And they were nice folks. They said, well, sure. So Jesus, he steps into that boat. Now just allow your mind to go here. You've done this. When you step into a boat that's half in the water and half on shore, it's not a solid, firm thing, is it? It kind of shakes. It kind of rocks. It kind of tips. And let me just say, before we can go fishing out there, let's be sure Jesus has stepped into our boat, individually and in your church. And when Jesus steps into your boat, into your life, it shakes things up, doesn't it? You become a better dad, a better mom, a better spouse, a better friend, a better neighbor, a better person. When Jesus steps into your boat, it changes everything. We have this saying back in Texas, if your boat ain't been rocked, you're still docked. And I believe this to be so true. Before you can reach that mission field out there, be sure that Jesus has reached your mission field. So Jesus steps into the boat, and he goes out and he finishes his sermon. The Bible does not record what he talked about, but I'm sure it was really good. And when he finished, he said, let's go fishing. And the fisherman, you know this story, the fisherman said, now wait a minute, you're a really good speaker and all, but you don't know much about fishing because we fished all night and what? Haven't caught a thing. First time in recorded history when a fisherman told the truth. He said, we fished all night and haven't caught a thing. Now, the reason they fished at night is because at night, the lakes were pretty shallow anyway, but at night, the water temperature gets warmer than the air temperature. And so the phytoplankton floats in the most shallow water, which is right up against the bank. And then the little fish come to eat the phytoplankton, and the next big fish come to eat that fish, and you got the idea. So the fishermen would be in the boat, moonlight shining, and they'd look out, and somebody would see, they would see the back of a fish or a fin, and they'd yell out, I've done this, I've been with them. They yell out, fish! And all the fishermen jump out of the boat about knee-deep in water. They take their nets, they throw it right up against the bank. They pull it in, they catch those fish, they walk back in, climb into the boat, and they have their catch. We fished all night. Maybe you're pastor are feeling a little bit of that. You've been working so hard. You fished all night. You're trying to make the bishop proud, your DS happy, and Jesus honored. It can be discouraging. And Jesus, when he heard him, said one simple thing. You know what it was? Go deep. Get out into the deep water. They said, that's not the way you catch fish. Jesus said, trust me, go deep. So they go out deep. They throw their nets over the boat. Now it's too deep to get out. And they begin to catch fish. And because they're catching fish, they yell to their friends, hey, come over here. We're catching fish. We're doing it in a different way. Things are happening. And they come over and everybody's catching fish. So many fish that the nets, what? Begin to break. And that's when Simon, the fearful fisherman, fell down onto his knees and said, Jesus, go away. I don't know what's going on. Pastors, please assure your laity, it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to be a fearful fisherman. It's okay to wonder what's our church going to look like if we really catch fish in our neighborhood. It's okay to be afraid and say, what's it going to look like if I lose a little control and power in this church because we have new, younger leadership coming on. It's okay to be a little bit of afraid. You see, even the first disciples were afraid of the results. And sometimes our laity gets so comfortable in their role that they quit thinking about the results. Jesus said, follow me to Simon, and I'll make you what? Follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men and women. Now, friends, I'm like you. I've read this Bible many times, studied it, preached about it, taught it, and I can assure you of this, that never once in the New Testament, never once does Jesus say, follow me, and I will make you the best committee chairperson in the world. As important as that may be. Never once does Jesus say, follow me, and I will make you the best musician in the world, as important as that may be. Hey, friends, never once does Jesus say, follow me, and I'll make you the best preacher in the world, as important as that may be. We just have to look at our lay folk. We have to look at each other and honestly acknowledge in the New Testament, Jesus has one imperative. Follow me and I'll make you. 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 Isn't it fair to ask the question, if we're not fishing, are we really following? Oh, you see, our laity and our clergy have got to get a laser-like focus on fishing for new people and trusting that Jesus will show us new ways to do it. We're not asking people to go crazy and be clever and all that. Just be intentional. To say that God's precious children are out there. Because, dear friends, following. Isn't that great? I was speaking at the East Ohio Annual Conference 2 years ago, and after I finished, a gentleman came up and said, "That's my river." That's actually in Ohio, where fish sometimes do jump in the boat. But I have bad news for you. Fish are not going to be jumping in your boat. Those days are over. We have to go fishing for them. And fishing equals following. So, dear friends, I'm so glad you're here today covenanting together, because this is really hard work. And we've got to have each other's back. And we've got to be supporting each other. And we've got to be willing to take some steps to go into deeper water and to fish in different ways. Now, don't be shocked. You can do this. This is what I would tell your lay folk. You can do this because God has wired the world up in such a way that you, no matter what your age, you might be 8 years old or 88 years old, that you might look like a superstar and you might look like you've been rung through life. You may be male or female. You may have any social life condition, but for some reason, God has designed this world so that you may be the person who can connect to another person and be the bridge over which that person walks for the very first time to be introduced to the light and the love of Jesus Christ. And this is why we tell lay folk, you can do this because you were once fish yourselves. And somebody caught you. Somebody, when you were a kid maybe. Somebody caught you. I mean, I might be so bold as to say, the reason you are in this room this day is somebody went fishing for you. And they caught you. May have been mom or dad. May have been when you were fifth grade Sunday school class and some blue-haired old Sunday school teacher bored you to death. But she loved you. And she connected. May have been some music minister, a grandfather, grandma, aunt, or an uncle. Actually, before I go any further, let's give God God's due. Would you just bow your heads right now and let God, would you just try to remember who caught you? You may not remember the person's name, but if you can see the face, about the time. Gracious God, we do pause here to thank you for the people who went fishing for us. Sometimes we get so busy we forget them. Sometimes our churches are so forward-looking that they forget to look back and remember upon whose shoulders we're building these churches. So I thank you for the people who caught each and every person here. And while I'm being thankful, God, let me be courageous and willing now to go fishing in my day any way I can to catch your precious children. Amen? And can I get an amen? Amen. This is how we accelerate the growth of our churches, to go faster. Now, I've learned this, and I'm speaking to clergy today, but I just want to say I really learned this very truth, that it takes laity and clergy side by side. But look, your laity want to be side by side with you, clergy. I mean, that's the way our denomination is built. To unleash the incredible creativity, persistence, and power of our lay folk. They want to be side by side with you, but they don't want to be on a treadmill. They want to be moving forward, making progress. So as leaders, our job is to equip ourselves, to learn from each other, to learn from people who have something to share. Our job is to be sure we are moving forward. Because, friends, we can't wait. You actually catch more fish than you realize. Your churches are doing some incredible work. I know your churches. You're touching lives out there. You're doing things. You're touching lives, but here's what happens. We catch more fish than we realize, but our nets break, and the fish swims off. That's why we're here for Covenant Day. To say we need each other in humble spirit. We need each other to weave ourselves together as a conference, to become a strong net, to be praying for each other, celebrating results, supporting pastors who are having such a difficult time, realizing that the community that you are located in makes all the difference in the world to the fruit that you're bearing. Our nets, you see, break when we get a judgmental spirit. That's what rips the net apart. So let Jesus step into your boat. Occasionally take time to put those nets out, to fix them up. That's what you're doing today. And the catch will be more than you realize. We can do this. So now I want to just share. I love this video, so I'm going to share it with you here.
Why do we drive ourselves as we do in our furious race these days to conquer outer space? Are we not perhaps forgetting inner space? Shall we find the true meaning of life by fleeing from it? This is lost to us, and this we should strive to recapture, a simple, innocent pleasure. And so I say to you, dear friends, relax, slow down, take it easy. What's your hurry?
Hello. Real pleasure.
Oh, Dr. Breen, your sermon had such a wonderful lesson for us.
Yes, sir. You really hit the nail right on the head there.
Yes, sir. That's one subject you just can't talk enough about, sin.
Yes,
Will you be around, Lord?
I love to laugh at that, just like you do. But I do want you to, I want you to realize this, that for an unchurched person or a de-churched person that's not been in church for a long time, that's how they perceive your church. And it's nothing to laugh about. You see, once we can get them there that first time, the best place to change culture and accelerate growth is in hospitality. I hope I've demonstrated that, and I hope you'll really tackle that. The next best place is in worship on Sunday morning. And it just can't afford to be anything less than intentionally spot on target. From the perspective of who? The first-time guest. Here's what we know. Churches that tend to design their Sunday morning experience, from hospitality to the hallways, what they look like, to the Sunday school, to the worship service. When you design that for the members who are here with the hope that a first-time guest will catch on, will not likely grow. Churches that are seeing their growth accelerate are because they design everything from the perspective of the first-time guest, because that's who God needs us to reach. With the assurance that good-hearted, loyal, loving members will catch on. So that means that code language in your worship guide, your bulletin, be sure you're explaining to your team, preparing worship, preparing the Sunday morning experience. Somebody in the meeting always should be asking, what's this look like to the first-time guest? When you begin to do that, you create the way to accelerate growth. Vance Havner, an old-time missionary, used to travel these parts. Used to say this. He said he attended many churches that started at 11 o'clock sharp and ended at 12 o'clock dull. We just can't do it. Just know that first-time guest, a first-time guest, I studied them for years. And believe me, they're very candid. You know, a first-time guest today, especially a young adult, they will tolerate many things. They will actually tolerate not having a great sermon. I wasn't pointing at you, Bishop. Sorry about that. Because no matter how well you preach, anybody can download Andy Stanley or Greg Rochelle anytime they want. They will actually tolerate music that is not perfect and outstanding because anybody, anytime they want, can download great Christian music. What they won't tolerate is boring. They will not tolerate boring. I used to, we have a jurisdictional home in San Antonio, at the time called the Methodist Mission Home, and part of its ministry was for the deaf, and I happened to be on that board for several years, and the sign language teacher taught us a little sign language that I'll share with you. She was really great. You may have seen this. So in American Sign Language from 1892, so this is the sign for Baptist. Dunking. That's pretty clever, huh? Dunking. Here was the sign for Methodist. Now for the deaf population, clapping is a bad thing. This is the sign for excitement. And she went on to explain that for generations, the Methodists were the exciting folks. And then, she's not Methodist, but she said, today among her young students, the sign for Methodist is, ho-hum. The stakes are sky high. You just, you just got to understand. And this experience is not just your sermon, Pastor. It's the experience of the morning. And it often begins with that hospitality that we spoke to you about. The experience of the morning. Now, my time is going to run short. I'm not going to be able to do everything in your packet. So I'm going to, but I want to shift gears here just a little bit because I want to have plenty of time to end with our yoke. So I do want to teach you another technique. This is probably the simplest technique and the most overlooked by mainline churches. Now, I do a lot of work for non-denominational churches and very large mega churches. And these are the things that they're doing that we're not doing. What I'm going to share with you does not cost a penny. Now, look, pastors, I pastored a pretty good-sized church. And it cost a lot of money, we thought, and we spent a lot of money to grow our church. But I have good news for you today. With technology, it does not cost much money to grow a church. It just takes intentionality. And one of your best friends is in your pocket right now. I'll just ask you to get it out. Is your cell phone. Just go ahead, please. Would you get your cell phone out? So I want to frame this around two questions and one statement. Here's how this works. And now your pastors that are here, last night I was in Tulsa with Cindy Havlick at a great church and wonderful other churches that were there. And I got the chance to speak to lay people. And Cindy will tell you, I look lay people right in the eye and say, when you're at church on Sunday morning, you are not there to be a consumer of a great sermon and great music. Not if you're a leader. If you're a leader and you are there on Sunday morning, you are there to work for the kingdom of God. to go fishing. So we ask lay people, be out there in the hallways, have your cell phone ready, and I'm going to teach you the 2 questions. The first question is this. You can ask this question to anybody, anytime. Now, I teach this hundreds of times all over the country. And let me just tell you, this works. Now, it may be a little uncomfortable for some of your folks in your churches, so not everybody's going to do it. But this is the way this goes. We want to create a culture in our churches where our lay people are inviting their friends, right? If not inviting them, at least recommending the church. It's lay folk who grow our churches. And when they get comfortable and they have a culture that is a culture of invitation and recommendation, you will watch great things happen in your church. So we ask lay folk, be out there in the hallways, and as you're having conversation, you can ask this to your best friend, you can ask this to the person you've seen at church for the last 30 years, or to a complete stranger. It won't make any difference. The question is simply this: what got you here the first time? What got you here the first time? Not why did you come, just what got you here. People love to tell their story, and you will hear great stories. What got you here the first time? So when I ask this question, what got you here the first time, and I'm listening, and somebody says to me, well, what got me here the first time back in 1948 is when we moved to this part of Edmond, Oklahoma. We met somebody at school, and they invited us. Now, friends, that's gold. That's gold. So I just want to say, when I hear that story, would you mind telling me that again and letting me video you to show on our screens and to use for training? You hear me? You're just going to be courageous. You're going to go fishing. I can only tell you I've done this hundreds and hundreds of times. I have never had anybody say no, because people love to tell their story. When you become a church that unleashes people's stories, that's when things begin to accelerate. So this is a young lady. I was in Atlanta. When I'm working with the church as a consultant, I spend my Sunday, I'm there in the hallway asking this question. So I met this young lady, and I asked her that question. The question is what? What got you here the first time? She told me what got her here the first time, and I said, would you mind letting me video? She was a first-time guest.
Okay, we started coming to the bridge probably in the spring of 2013 because we had some friends that were coming here, and we heard some good things about the church, and we just decided to give it a try, and it's been a good fit for our family.
Hey, princess!
Now, wasn't that darling? So what'd you hear her say? Friends. Did they invite her? Did they invite her? They just what? She just heard good things about the church. Now, I can tell you, I was a pastor for 44 years, and when you're a preacher and you stand up and you say to your folks, hey, invite somebody to church next week, they're going, yeah. And when I say, would you talk about our church? They're going, yeah. But when lay people teach lay people, they listen. So just imagine that in your church you heard a story like that from one of your own about 20 times a year. It took, I think, 13 seconds. This little church, this was a new church start I was working with. She said that. I asked her the question. She said, sure. I made this videotape. I immediately texted it to the volunteer media director, who immediately downloaded it into a slide. We told Mike Broom, the pastor, and about 20 minutes into the service, Mike just said, take a look. And everybody saw this. And all Mike had to say is, see what happens when you talk about our church. The whole thing, 30 seconds. Pastors, you can find 30 seconds in your service to turn wishers into fishers. So I want to ask you to practice hospitality, all right? So I want to ask you now, here's what tech people tell me. I'm not a techie myself, but turn your phone sideways. Is this the landscape All right? Now, here's what I'd like for you to do. Before you video, I want you to turn to somebody and ask them what got you to your home church the first time. Hear their story. You only need about 15 to 30 seconds. Then, okay, ask them, hear the story. Then ask their permission. Now, here's the permission. Would you mind telling me that again so I can videotape you for our screens and for training purposes? Be totally transparent, okay? Then I'd like for you to practice actually making the video. Am I making sense? Go. Find somebody. What got you to your church the first time? Okay, all right. All right. Everybody had a chance? Y'all had a chance? Now, friends, let me, couple things here, couple things. I'm just going to suggest, as leaders, when you begin to teach this to your leadership, now, not everybody in the church is going to do this at first. So we have seen just amazing things as churches get this into their culture. You don't need 100% of your church doing this. If you can get 5 or 6 people just to be doing it. But when I can tell you, when about 20 to 26 times a year you see a video like that, if you have screens. If you do not have screens in worship, try starting your business meetings. Haul in a screen with this. Put it on your YouTube channel. Put it on your Facebook. When you unleash the power of laity, it's because they're telling their story. And Jesus has changed their life. They want to tell you that story. Just give them the chance. And now, if you are not sure about the technology, ask any 14-year-old. They can, really, somebody can show you how to do this. And so the first question is, what got you here the first time? Ask this question of anybody. I've done this, like I say, so many times, and actually I said I've never heard anybody tell me no, but I do recall one young man in Minnesota said no, and I saw him, and he was a first-time guest. I said, well, what got you here the first time? He happened to be the landscape architect who landscaped around the church. Now, this is not a new church. He'd been doing this for years, had never stepped inside, but he fell in love. And he decided to get married. So he decided, let's get married at this church. And they started coming to the church to get used to it. And he and his fiance were on fire. And it was a great story. And I said, well, can I put this on, videotape? And he said, no. He said, because this week I'm taking my fiance to Hawaii and I'm going to propose. And I don't want her to see this before I propose. And he did, in fact, propose. And this is a church I worked with a little bit, and they got married. And now this young man, last year, is chairing the board of trustees at this church. And they're building a family as a part of a church. And they were thrilled when they did get back, and he saw his video. And she said, oh, I'm going to keep this for the rest of my life. My husband is so sweet, Here's the second question. Now, friends, hey, look, when I say teach your laity, I don't know what kind of things and how much time you're spending teaching in your leadership board meetings. But in many conferences, I work with many churches where every board meeting is just about conducting business. And I say, what a waste. Board meetings and leadership meetings, that's where you're outfitting your lay people to be fishermen. That's where you're getting you're teaching them things. So this takes 5-10 minutes to teach. It does not take a lot of time, but it has cumulative effect in the life of your church. The second question is this. Now, folks, you want to teach your lay people. This is a question that you only ask fellow leaders, fellow active people in the church. And we recommend that you ask this question, you do the same process, and you archive these videos. And then you strategically sprinkle them throughout your year. So about 20 times a year, somebody's going to hear the answer to this question, and about 20 times a year to what got you here the first time. Here's the question. What would you recommend about our church? What would you recommend about our church? Not, what do you love about our church? Many churches inherently ask that question. What do you love about our church? But you're really then training your laity to be consumers. You know, when you love chocolate, what do you do with it? Consume it. We want to teach laity not to be consumers, but producers of the ministry of your church. Active. Forward. So the question is, what would you recommend about our church? And you can ask this. We teach churches do this at board meetings and leadership meetings. Just do it in a meeting, and it's so much fun. So here's, just take a look at this young man.
This is what I would recommend about our church. We have a very interactive atmosphere where it isn't just coming and listening to somebody speak at you, but you're able to tackle the topics of the day and the questions and doubts that you have with one another in a setting that is friendly and conducive to doing that. So I really enjoy that about our church.
Now, folks, as a consultant, I don't care what this young guy said. I mean, the content. What I loved is he started it with this. How'd he start it? This is what I'd recommend. So you ask people when they answer this question, would you start it with, this is what I would recommend? Can you imagine the impact of your church when about 20 times a year, lay folk hear people just like them using the word recommend? You see, it begins to teach them the culture of recommendation. And again, that took about 15 seconds. And this does not take time out of your worship service. So again, I'd like for you to practice. Would you just turn to somebody and ask that question? What would you recommend about your church? Okay, thank you. All right, are you with me? So, thank you. When churches get this practice and this behavior is from the get-go of who they are, it's just a lot of fun, and people have a great time with it. And your church becomes known as the church of the first 30 seconds, where you're very intentional about reaching out to people. And your church becomes known as a church where people's stories can be heard and they can share. And your church becomes known as a place that uses today's technology to reach today's generation. And your church becomes known as that place where you're going fishing and you're proud of going fishing because you believe that Jesus needs you to be fishing. Now I've got about 10 more minutes. Can you handle 2 more minutes? So the first question is, what got you here? The second question is, what would you recommend about the church? There's 2 questions. Now the third is a statement. I'm going to ask you to write the statement down, or at least pay real careful attention to it. Let me say before I get into the statement that please do not make this statement into a question. You will offend somebody. So this is a statement, not a question. Let me say also that this is a statement that I learned. Fiona, my writing partner, works with Southwest Airlines, known for its great culture. And Fiona taught me this about how they create one of the ways they create the great culture at Southwest Airlines. So it's based on a cultural principle. Here's the principle. Are you ready? The sooner that someone says something positive about your organization, the quicker they begin to form brand loyalty to it. The sooner they say something positive, the sooner they form brand loyalty. Every major corporation knows this. You know, Ford and Chevy, they spend millions and millions of dollars on advertising. But their advertising, surprisingly, isn't just directed at trying to find a new customer. Because, you know, when the bishop drives off the Ford lot with his new $68,000 Ford Expedition, he hasn't gone 2 blocks till he begins to experience, see, you even know the name for it, buyer's remorse. Well, Ford and Chevy hopes that the bishop gets home that night to watch television, and he sees a commercial of a bright, sparkling, young, happy family having a great experience driving their Ford Expedition. And then the bishop says, "Oh, I'm pretty smart." They've changed. Because Ford knows commercials do not sell cars. Who sells cars? People who are recommending that car to their friend. So they want their buyer to be their recommender. And they do all that money. You know, that's why car commercials no longer tell you about the specifics of a car. They just tell you about the experience of driving that car, because they want you to talk about it to your friend. So the sooner that you say something positive about your experience with an organization, the sooner you form brand loyalty. Now, you can reflect on this in your life. If you go to a good new restaurant and you quickly tell a neighbor, "Man, we had the best Italian food," you are quickly becoming a loyal customer. The same dynamic holds true in church life. Now, the inverse is true. The longer you wait to say something positive about your organization, the more the experience dissipates. Same experience, but it's your response to it. So the sooner you can get a first-time guest or a church member to say something positive about your church, the sooner they begin to form brand loyalty. Now, here's how brand loyalty translates in the life of the church. Somebody comes, they're a first-time guest. You don't see them again for 8 or 9 weeks. You think they've lost interest, but that's just their life schedule. I mean, even the most loyal of Methodist church member only comes about 1.4 times a month now. Every week attendance is no longer a sign of loyalty. But that guest who had a good experience at the coffee shop, when they talk about your church, they're not talking about that church. Here's what they'll say: my church. And that loyal person becomes a supporter in more ways than you realize, including their financial generosity. The issue is forming that brand loyalty as soon as possible. Are you with me? So here's the statement. You do not need to have a committee meeting. You don't need to organize a team. You just get a few folks together. Just position yourselves at the end of the worship service near the exit of the church. And as people are leaving, you just say this as they're walking away, as they're walking out. You just smile and say, "I hope you had a good experience today. I hope you had a good experience." You see why you don't want to turn that into a question? You don't want to say, "Did you have a good experience?" That puts somebody on the spot. You just say, "I hope you had a good experience." Now, when I say, Cindy, I hope you had a good experience, Cindy has 3 responses. One, she can just smile and go on, which meant it sucked. 2, she can say, "The music was so loud it hurt my ears," in which you might get some good feedback. Or 3rd, when I say, "I hope you had a good experience," and she said, "I sure did," what's beginning to happen in her mind? She's forming brand loyalty. You see, the best place to fish is in the pond you know best, your church on a Sunday morning. So many fish wiggle out of your net only because of lack of intentionality. I hope you had a good experience this morning. Now, friends, I'm winding my time down, but I'm going to ask you to work a little bit. It just hit me when I was up here. I pastored this church in Flower Mound at Treach, and we were a new church start. And you have some. Would you just take a moment and would you just encourage your new church planters? Would you just clap and thank them for it? It was so hard. It was so hard, and it was so hard. But we finally built our major sanctuary, and it's a great place. If you're ever in the Flower Mound area between Denton and Dallas, you stop by and look at Treach Memorial United Methodist Church. It's a tremendous place, and it's a great place. Many people just come to see it, and it was a big deal. At the time we built it in Flower Mound, it was the biggest building in Flower Mound. Now, it's not that way now, but it was at the time. And so when we had the opening, the grand opening kind of a deal, you all done this. I know you're pastors. You've had that big special moment. It was so cool. The mayor was there. The mayors of all the surrounding towns came. The state senator came. Everybody who was a muckety-muck and anything came. Of course, the DS was there and the bishop was there. It was such a big deal. I flew my mother in from Springfield, Illinois, because I wanted her to know her little boy had gone to the big city and done good. And sure enough, throughout the whole day, she just beamed. She just beamed. And we were all out there on the platform, all the muckety-mucks, the bishop and the DS, and we were all in our garb and all that kind of stuff. And it was a great day. And when the day finished, finally I got home and I had just a few minutes alone with my mom. And I took my tie off, my jacket, propped my feet up. I said, "Well, Mom, what'd you think?" And without hesitation, as only a mother could say it, she said, "I thought your pant legs were too long." Golly, I hope you don't think I came all the way from Dallas to say your pant legs are too long. You're doing great work. Hard work. And on this covenant day, I hope we can end it just realizing, let's be in this together. But I do this training a lot, and there's always somebody that I've offended. I don't know who it is today, but there'll be somebody. And usually what they say is, you just sound like you're teaching business principles. And we're a church. And I own that. I do teach a lot of business principles because I'm in the culture change business. So I'm wondering, would you just watch this video with me to remind us of why we're doing this? Now, this is an old video. Maybe you've seen it before. But if you don't mind, before we get to the yoke, if you just let this sink in about why we do what we do.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me, and like a flood, His mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace, amazing
I still get teary when I watch that video. That little kid, Friends, You all are doing some great work. Your pant legs aren't too long. But God needs us to have amazing churches to share God's amazing grace. And I know Bishop Nunn's heart. I've known him for a long time. He wants to do everything possible to have your church be an amazing witness in your community. It's been fun for me to be a part of this today, but I want to end it like this. Bishop, may I get your help? And I don't want to put anybody on the spot who may have slipped out early, but are the newly elected chairs, if you're still here, would you come up and help me out here with this? The newly elected chairs. And table leaders, there's a sheet in that packet called Yoke Notes. Here's what I'd like to ask you to do. Now, I'm not real good at this kind of thing. This may be corny. I've never done this. So sometimes I use this yoke to teach these principles that are listed there. Would you, around your table, let's take about 5 or 6 minutes. Would you, around the table, just read some of those notes? And I'm going to ask Bishop, if you would, Bishop Nunn, if you would start, would you read just the scripture here first?
Come unto me, all ye that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden light.
So you're part of the covenant. You're next in that yoke. And these yoke notes, just consider some of these people that work in this field have taught me these, the value of that yoke. First of all, it's the multiplier effect. Yoked together, you do more than just twice the work. It becomes exponential, what you can accomplish. Secondly, it's about teamwork. The yoke distributes the workload onto more shoulders. There's a heavy burden to be the witness of Jesus Christ in this area, and the yoke is on all your shoulders. And it reduces the burden on each individual animal. In time, it creates a bond or a connection, not only between the animals, but with the farmer. This connection is so important because the beasts of burden, that's us. We're connected together. And the farmer, a good farmer, I interviewed farmers about this yoke. Farmers find creative ways to ease the burden. Now, in a few minutes, when you get a chance and feel this yoke, this is a heavy thing. They find ways to put lotion and grease to help relieve the hurt from the animal's neck, or strips of cotton. How are you helping each other ease your burden? How are you and your connection and your teamwork helping ease the burden of your colleagues, finding creative ways? Are you making that phone call now or then to a colleague that you hardly know? Just saying, hey, I appreciate the good work that you're doing. Trust is what happens to beasts of burden and a yoke. And they develop trust in the Master, Jesus Christ, because they know the one who put the yoke on them, at the end of the day, removes that burden. Can I get an amen? and leadership. You know, those animals, there's a lead line. And without good leadership, the animals will begin to work against each other. And the stronger will pull the weaker one way or the other. But they're not making the progress they could make with teamwork. You have a leader in Bishop Nunn who wants nothing more to set the direction, to ease your burden, to keep you going in the same direction, to be the witness of Jesus Christ as a Methodist presence in your community. Bishops in this role, they are not trying to exert their will over yours. They're not trying to push you around. They are like a good farmer, trusting in that bond of the yoke, but knowing there's got to be a common direction or there will be infighting. Training an old animal begins to train a young animal. You old-timers, how are you pouring your life into these newer pastors coming up? It doesn't take a committee. It just takes your decision. Find somebody, take them to coffee, love on them, help train them, help mentor them. And the last one, Bishop, is movement. Even the strongest oxen, if it is standing still, will grow weary and collapse. It's movement that energizes. So take a day or two to rest, but realize our job is to move forward, to really have traction, to really make a difference, to have amazing churches. So you will be pushed by supervisors, but more importantly, you will be pulled by the mission field that said to Paul, "Here I am, come here." Your community is begging for you. And we've been equipped with the grace of Jesus Christ to deliver the goods. Amen? You've been great. Thank you. Now, I forgot what I was going to ask you to do. Would you all mind, would the four of you mind hoisting this yoke and coming over here? And now I think you have some announcements, or I don't know when you're finished, so I don't want to wear you out, but I do want people to have a chance to feel this. Put your fingerprints on it. Say at this Covenant Day, we didn't just come and say, we touched our common mission together. So there's a lot of you. I don't know how to organize a bunch of Oklahomans. You just come as the Spirit moves you.
Jim, why don't we pray? And as we pray here with the new chairs of the orders, it's probably fitting that we're holding a yoke. And as we do that too, I want to give thanks to those who've led us in the last 4 years, and D.A. and Phil. I'm not sure where y'all are, and Mike. Thank you. And this is a spiritual journey together, so I don't know many other ways to start a spiritual journey than to pray together. So let's pray. Oh God, here is a yoke that as we stand and hold it, we become aware that it is a little heavier than we want to carry. And we don't want to do it by ourselves. And we thank you that there are 4 of us here who symbolically stand before you on behalf of everybody, holding your yoke. And we hold one another in prayer as well. God, come, refresh us, and renew us as we take your yoke upon us and we gladly carry the burden. We know it's light and we know it's easy. Please make it so. In Jesus' name, amen.